December 7th, 2017 is an A day. Objective number 2. What evidence supports evolution? If you look at this picture, there is something that helps us identify that perhaps there's some relationship. What are they showing us in this picture, Amira? I don't know, but if we look on the computer, we can tell. I'll tell you tomorrow, okay? What is the figure or the animation showing us? And it's even labeled for you in some of the metacarpals, or these actually phalanges, are labeled for us. What do we see, Jordan? Right, the bone structure looks the same. It looks very similar. Brianna, why would all these animals have the same bone structure? They could have a common ancestor. I want to tell you something that's really, I don't know if you want to say sensitive, but it's really cool because I've been doing a lot of research on how closely related organisms are to us. And I just read that cats share 90% of our DNA. 90%. We share 60% of the DNA with chickens. We share 80% of our DNA with cows. We share 98.62 of span of 99% of our DNA with chimpanzees. And other types of monkeys like gorillas, bonbons or bobos, I forgot what they call them. They baboons? They're not baboons. They're not baboons. They're not baboons. They are. Let me see if we can find them. They are these kind of animals. Bonobos. They share DNA with us, and it's believed that perhaps we crossed evolutionary paths probably between 4 and 7 million years ago. So scientists can't just make this up. They need facts. They need evidence. They need these puzzle pieces to come together. Did we find all the pieces of the puzzle? No. Are we continuously looking? Yes. They actually spent somewhere in the realm of $13 million genotyping and finding out the genome of a chicken. Now, how that's important leads to the longevity of us. Oh, thank you. But we'll do that later. Because the ultimate goal is survival. We want to survive in our environment, and we like the other organisms to survive as well, because when we cohabit the earth, we all live together and we help each other survive. When things change on the earth, something else changes. It's almost like a domino effect. So we want to keep things in check, and we want to keep things balanced, because the ultimate goal is to balance. So last night's homework gave us yesterday's answer to the question. So let's look at yesterday's question. Yesterday's question asked us, how does natural selection give those giraffes long necks? Not gives. How does natural selection give giraffes long necks? How do they get those long necks? All new traits come from where? Mutations, but that's not the answer. So the mutation had to exist. However, sometimes mutations are detrimental. They're not beneficial. Sometimes they're beneficial. They'll only last if they're beneficial, but what do they need to be beneficial for? What do they need to, how are they beneficial? So how does natural selection give giraffes long necks, Brianna? Same thing. Go ahead. It helps them eat better. So if they eat better, they have a better adaptation. The adaptation is how you survive in your... How you survive where, Josh? In your environment. If I change your environment, do you have the right adaptations to survive? We might not. Can we survive in Antarctica? We change our environment. But if we didn't have these strong adaptations like our brains, would we be able to survive in Antarctica? Joshua, Jordan, what do you think? Yeah, Antarctica is really cold. There's no real inhabitants of Antarctica. People just study there. Nobody lives there. It's not possible because there's really no way to survive. It's so expensive to keep that um, electricity running, and they have to they can't grow crops over there, so everything has to be imported. So they need helicopters coming back and forth, and the climate is really brutal over there. So it's not, they have to keep themselves warm. You're outside for more than a minute, you can get frostbite because it's so cold. So you have to be really careful. Everything has to be covered. So if you get locked out of your house, you're in big trouble. Scientists study there. They're in protective environments. There's buildings and such that they live in. I don't even know if they can take showers there. Because they have to keep themselves warm. They probably put tarps up at first. Yeah, and then they take little breaks. They had to bring a helicopter over there and different materials to help them stay warm. So it was a slow process, right? Didn't happen overnight. Let's move on. How does natural selection give giraffes long necks? Well, a mutation occurred that allowed these giraffes to be adapted to their environment. Adapt to their environment. Now, this didn't happen overnight. It took over 25 million years for this adaptation to come out fully. The original giraffe actually took two different paths. So we saw that picture yesterday with two different avenues that the organism went. The mutation, there were two different mutations based on where they lived and what they ate. Most of the organisms survive based on what they eat. So their function of their eating, herbivores, carnivores, if their food is readily available, they'll survive. And if they have the ability to obtain food, they'll survive. If they can't, then they probably won't survive. And there are other factors as well. If they're prey, they have to be able to have adaptations to allow them to escape or camouflage or have mimicry, which is act like other organisms that might be poisonous. There are two different butterflies. One of them is poisonous, the other one's not. And one of them tries to mimic the other one so that the birds will think it's poisonous. That's an adaptation. So there are other things we're going to learn about. Yes, sir. Yes, it can conform into, and it's very, very bright. I read something else recently about the octopus, that octopus and humans are far away. As far as ancestry is concerned, we're very, 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 very distant relatives. Like there's very small connection to us. However, the octopus has an eye that has a function just like humans, but it's even more complex and even more brilliant, their eye. Because if you look, our eyes have blind spots. We don't have 100% peripheral vision, right? You look straight ahead, you can see slightly peripheral. Octopus have the ability to see in a broader spectrum than humans do. Yes, they could see, well, but their eye has the ability to see better than us. They have better vision than humans, but they need that. That adaptation is important for them because they have to escape. They have to find their predators. Our eyes are great adaptations for us as well. And that's why if our eyes don't work well, we need to fix that. We need to put on glasses. We have the ability to. What would happen to an octopus if it was born without vision? It would die. But we don't, people that are born without vision, they don't die. We help them survive. If they didn't have adaptations or people to help them, take care of them, they wouldn't survive. So we have another adaptation that helps us survive. It's our brain. But I think what the octopus is a very intelligent organism as well. All right, let's stay on track. Today's question goes back to what evidence? We can't just make this stuff up. We can't just make up ideas without facts. You need to support these ideas. So Charles Darwin studied for years different organisms and tried to understand why there are so many similarities, but yet there's so many differences. There's a lot of biodiversity. Like right now, there's over 8 million organisms on the earth. And 40 million years ago, there were even more, but they don't still live today. Their ancestors are here. When you look at the organisms that were once here, saber-toothed tiger is one of my favorite ones. Their teeth are very brittle, but they look intimidating. One of their best adaptations is the fact that they can extend their jaw open really, really wide. There was a Hagerman horse that resembled a zebra. The bison, we have bison today, but not to that extent. They're a little bit different. The sloths are huge. The wolves have different caricature. They're a little bit more stealth. Mammoths, we don't have mammoths today. We have elephants. And the American lion up here, it's a little bit different to the lion that we have today. It's a subspecies. Well, actually, our lion is a subspecies. And even the camel, they're extinct now. They no longer live. Some of these have been extinct 10,000 or more years. Some of them could be a little bit more recently extinct. And what's happening right now is we're really nervous about a lot of the organisms that live on the earth today. There could be another mass extinction. And who causes that? Humans. Not necessarily hunters, but more than hunters. We take their space. We take their habitat. We take their prey. We take their clean air, their clean water. All those things, we take these things for granted, but they can't. They can't fix it. They can't get filters in their ocean. Yes, sir. A mastodon resembles a woolly mammoth and an elephant, but it has lots of hair. Look at it. And I think it has a little more girth. And it was one of the earliest, I guess, elephants of its time. Even earlier than a woolly mammoth. All right, let's look at lesson number 11. Does anybody want to come to the mic and volunteer to read for us? All right, Frankie, come up here. Shh, if you're quiet, you can go next. Where's your paper? Yeah, read up to you.
Imagine that you were a spy looking for clues to support evolution. Where would you look? There is evidence for evolution from the following different areas. Fossil evidence. Fossils are the remains or traces of organisms that lived long ago. The fossil record shows that organisms have changed over time. It shows that the earliest organisms were simple living things. They lived in water. Fossils show that these organisms evolved into more complex organisms over millions of years.
Thank you. There should be a sentence that we underline or we highlight for emphasis. What supports evolution in this sentence or this paragraph? What sentence do you think is most important, Thomas? Well, that's a definition of fossils, but does that tell us the evidence? How do we use fossils as evidence, Josh?
The fossil records show that organisms have changed.
Excellent. Second sentence Josh wants us to underline. The fossil record shows that organisms have changed over time. Good job. Would you like to read the next paragraph, sir?
Yes.
I need you to articulate well, please. Articulate. That means I want you to pronounce your words clearly.
Anatomy. The study of the parts or structures of living things is called anatomy. By studying the parts of living things, we can find out how closely related they are. For example, the bones of a bat's wings and the human hand are similar. This suggests the animals are related.
Thank you. What sentence proves evolution? What is the sentence, Emerson? Exactly. The bones of the bat's wings and the human hand are similar. This is evidence. These are details that prove that anatomy supports evolution. So we have organisms that are similar. Brianna, come to the mic.
Can
Can you wiggle your ears? It's always a good for a laugh, but nothing else, at least for modern humans. Ear movements are controlled by muscles. Human ear muscles are considered vestigial structures. Vestigial structures are leftovers. They are usually reduced in size and serve no function. Scientists think that vestigial structures had a function in the ancestors of the animals that now have them. Almost all animals have vestigial structures. Humans have more than 100. The appendix is a human vestigial structure.
Thank you. So they're saying that vestigial structures have no function today, but they must have had a function in the ancestors. Why do we have any of our traits or our structures? To help us do what, Amira? Help us do what, Jordan? Move or adapt to help us survive. We need traits to help us survive. If a trait doesn't help us survive, it could go away and you might not see it again. There are over 100 vestigial structures that humans have. So this will be a bonus for you guys. If you come up with 100 vestigial structures, you can look them up or even come up with 20 of them. 20 vestigial structures and hand them in. So what sentence, I don't know, we'll see how good they are. What sentence should we underline that proves evolution here? Jordan? What's the sentence that proves evolution? Perfect. Excellent job. So you're underlining scientists think vestigial structures had a function in the ancestors of animals that now have them. Okay, the next paragraph deals with embryology. Natalie.
An embryo is an organism in its very early stages of development before it is born. Embryology is the study of embryos as they develop. Scientists compare the embryos of different living things to see if they are alike. Organisms with similar embryos probably evolved from a common ancestor.
Thank you. Remember when we did that, the two gametes? We had the sperm and we had the egg, and we put them together to make a zygote, and you counted the chromosomes, and there was a picture of the embryo because the scientists messed up all the embryos, and we weren't able to tell which embryo was which because they all looked the same. They all looked very, very similar. They were so similar that we couldn't tell them apart, so we had to count their chromosomes. How does this support evolution? What's the sentence, Marcel? All right, but I need somebody to answer this question. What's the sentence for this? Go ahead, Zaria. Exactly. Underline that sentence. Organisms with similar embryos probably evolved from a common ancestor. All right. We're looking for the last thing on biochemistry. Emerson, come to the mic.
Biochemistry. All living things are made up of chemicals called proteins. There are many kinds of proteins. Each has its own chemical print or structures. Scientists can identify the chemical makeup of proteins. They have discovered that the blood of certain animals have particular kinds of proteins. They compare the blood proteins of different animals. In this way, they can tell how closely the organisms are related.
Good job. All right. In your body, you have chromosomes. Chromosomes are made up of genes. Those genes are made from DNA. So those DNA molecules will code for a gene. Those genes, the job of the gene is to make proteins. They make over 80,000 proteins in your body. So whatever your DNA makes, those proteins, that's what they're comparing. Because the proteins have a special job. Remember we talked about how do you get cystic fibrosis? It makes the wrong protein, and then that protein doesn't allow for absorption of water properly through the membrane, and then it causes the mucus to build up. That's a kind of protein that we're looking for. So if another organism had that same protein, we would know that they had to be related to us. I doubt that they have that protein, but they have similar proteins to us. They have to be related to us. They're making the same proteins. So what are we going to underline here? What are they comparing? What's the evidence, Jordan? You're good at this. So you're really good in ELA, huh? They compare the blood proteins of different animals. Good job. This way, they can tell how closely related they are. If you look at the next pages, they're talking more about fossil evidence. They're looking at the evolution of a horse, anatomy, embryology. You're going to work with a partner for the next 6 minutes, and you're finishing up to page 72. Go.